Hi, and welcome to Bacon and Eggs. My name is Tyler Carlin.
And I'm Ethan Edgehill.
Thanks for tuning in to our first episode.
This is a new podcast we created to be entertainment for your morning commute.
We've known each other for a little over 13 years at this point, and in that time, it's been a goal of ours to never stop being creative together.
Unfortunately, that grew a little more difficult for us when we moved away. Podcasting seemed like our next logical step.
We've kicked around ideas on what to do for years, and I think we finally settled on a topic we like.
Since we met, we've been going to the movies together, reading the same books, listening to the same music, and having in-depth conversations about all of it.
We used to spend hours in the local bookstore behind the movie theater going back and forth about the movies we just saw.
Really getting down to the nitty-gritty of the content we took in.
So our goal here is to bring that to all of you listening. It's going to be a little bit of review, a little bit of theory, and the occasional hot take.
So thanks everyone for listening.
And we promise, this intro will just be a one-time thing.
So without further ado, Tyler, what'd you think of Game of Thrones this week?
Well, I didn't catch Game of Thrones this week, but I did watch Iron Man.
Oh man, Iron Man. Takes me back to a time when the actual midnight premiere came out at midnight instead of 7:30.
Yeah, and that midnight premiere came out 3,413 days ago.
That's a long time ago. What is that,
That's
like 9 years?
Yeah, like nearly 10 years.
Good Lord.
Yeah, it feels like just yesterday, but believe it or not, we could not drive to this movie ourselves.
Yeah, no, did not have a driver's license.
Nope. So that's horrifying.
I mean, it takes something to make a 24-year-old feel old.
Yeah, that was actually the day I got my learner's permit.
I think, yeah, you might be right about that.
Yeah.
I do remember that day. Oh, man.
Anyway, this movie grossed $585.2 million on a budget of only $140 million.
Well, that must mean people liked it. What did people think about it?
Well, it actually did better with critics than it did with the audience reception, but both were extremely high numbers, and honestly, the difference is probably negligible. Well, it got a 94% certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes from critics and a 91% audience reception on Rotten Tomatoes. So like I said, very similar numbers there, but slightly edged out by the critic reception.
So you're telling me there's a superhero movie that the critics liked better than the audience?
That's what I'm telling you, man.
That doesn't seem possible.
I know. And this is like the first big one that kicked off a whole new era of superhero films.
Yeah, got that Marvel Cinematic Universe going on. There's been, 20,000 films?
Well, like 16, but we'll get back to that.
I mean, probably.
Eventually, hopefully. So, Ethan, do you remember Iron Man?
I mean, I've seen it recently enough, I believe. You know, I may or may not have watched it last night.
Nice. Well, tell me what it's about.
So, it's about this fella named Tony Stark. I don't know if you guys have heard of him or not. He was kind of an innovator in the weapons scene here a while ago when that whole thing was kicking off with, the Middle East and all that controversy. So this guy, Tony, he's real rich because of all this, and people don't really like him all that much.
So basically what happens is Tony gets kidnapped by a group of terrorists known as the Ten Rings, which is a villain I really don't know anything about, but it sounds like they've got some comic book presence.
Yeah, it's a pretty sinister name for somebody that gets pretty much wiped out relatively quickly in this movie.
Because they messed with Tony Stark, the greatest mind of all time, and even later in the film they addressed the fact that they didn't even want to kidnap Tony Stark, and they didn't realize that that's who they were kidnapping.
So they try to force him to make another copy of this big old bomb that he built. It's called the Jericho missile. And he decides that he's not going to do that. Instead, he decides he's going to create this super suit and blow his way out of this cave in the Middle East.
Now, and that's all well and good, but unfortunately the man who rescued him and has been keeping him alive with a portable arc reactor in his chest dies saving Tony while he is escaping in the first Mark I Iron Man suit.
And that means a lot to Tony. I mean, I don't think anybody's ever really sacrificed himself for Tony, even in the smallest regard at this point. So that's a big turning point for him. Anyway, heads on back to the States. He's a new man.
Yeah, I mean, he's a completely different person. He goes from Playboy before leaving to, everything but. Now he's just a philanthropist, and he doesn't even want anything to do with weapons construction, but he can't quite let go of the Iron Man suit that he created.
No, but he tells the whole world that his company's going to shut down weapons manufacture. You know who's not happy about this? His business partner, Obadiah Stane, which is a really sinister name.
It is a sinister name, but it is also the name of the man who helped Tony's father found Stark Industries. And he's been Tony's business partner his whole life and helped raise the boy after his father died.
And I think that has a lot to do with the problems that Tony has kind of encountered down the road, is that he feels like he can never really add up to what his father wanted him to, and I don't think this guy's really helping him.
No, Obadiah definitely capitalizes on Tony's genius and definitely wants to take advantage of everything that the Stark name is and profit off of it.
So long story short, this guy spends a lot of time building these super suits. You know, he makes 3, 4 of them, finally figures out the whole flight thing. It's a couple hiccups. There's a really great robot that I absolutely love, who just keeps dousing him with fire extinguisher over and over again. It's one of my favorite running jokes in any movie ever.
And while Tony's doing all that, Obadiah is in the background trying to recreate the arc reactor that Tony built in the cave while he was away, so to speak.
Now, why does he need that arc reactor?
So that he can power his own suit.
Right. Because he got the suit from the 10 Rings. Because it turns out, all along, he was in charge and responsible for Tony getting kidnapped in the first place.
And he was the one that ordered the hit on Tony's life. And he was so out of whack with this that even the 10 Rings, a terrorist organization, said that they didn't want anything to do with Tony Stark, and they didn't want to have to... They weren't being paid enough to take out Tony Stark.
No, because he didn't even tell them who their target was.
Correct.
So, essentially, Tony's lovely assistant, Pepper Potts, gets a note into this and realizes what's going on, figures out Obadiah is actually the bad guy, and she goes with Agent Coulson of, S.H.I.E.L.D. fame, although it's not even called S.H.I.E.L.D. at this point. They had not come up with a name.
Yeah, it happens by the end of the film.
I know. And it's just a great reveal.
Yeah. I mean, that was... Yeah, I agree. We can get back to my thoughts on that later.
Yes. Anyhow, they go to arrest Obadiah, and at this point, Obadiah has already taken the arc reactor out of Tony's chest, leaving him for dead. Essentially, he's rescued by his comrade, Rhodes. What is Rhodes' first name?
It's just Rhodes.
Is it just Rhodes? It's Rhodey.
Yeah, it's Colonel Rhodes.
Yeah, okay. And he's rescued by his comrade, good friend, Colonel Rhodes, the guy who's been helping him this whole time figure out his life and his place in the world. And they go to stop Stane. And after a big, long, Michael Bay-esque battle, the whole thing's really kind of over.
So then there at the end, Pepper, ever the hero she is the one who delivers the final blow to the main villain of the film.
And that ends up being important later on, way down the road. But it also wins her the love of Tony's heart, first and finally.
And now Tony, being the first and pioneer of a new cinematic universe, has 2 options. He can either go play the normal superhero role and keep his identity a secret and go with the alibi that's been provided for him by S.H.I.E.L.D., or he can reveal to the world that he is Iron Man. And Tony, being the vain man he is, reveals to the world
that he is Iron Man. That's the last line of the movie. I am Iron Man.
All right, so we've done a little rundown on the film. Hopefully everybody listening to this has seen it and will not need that rundown and rolled their eyes throughout the whole thing.
If you have not seen Iron Man, please send us an email at baconandeggsmedia@gmail.com, because I'm so sorry we just spoiled this movie for you, but I would love to send you a copy of Iron Man.
It's super duper. Hashtag spoilers. So what are your thoughts on this film? I want to go through the whole thing, not necessarily scene by scene, but what did you like, what didn't you like? And I don't want to say what would you change, because I'm sort of the belief that once this product is created, like...
There's no going back.
Right, there's no going back. There's just what you liked and what you didn't like.
I mean, from the very get-go, from the beginning, I personally think that they try to paint Tony as this guy you're not supposed to like. He's a little bit of a jerk. He's a little bit sexist. He's a little bit, I'm just going to throw my money on the table. He has the whole thing with the martini glasses that come out of the big military box. And
oh my gosh, I thought that was so good.
Has that line about, every order over $500,000 gets one of these thrown in for free.
Right, where he shows up at the defense contractors meeting and he's like doing the demonstration, and afterwards he opens a big weapons box.
Yeah, and he's
martinis.
He's just the worst. He's hitting on the person driving the Humvee right before they get blown up. And I mean, he's just... I feel like you're not supposed to. I do like him, but I feel like you're not supposed to like him. They definitely paint that picture of him just being this horrible kind of philandering, just awful playboy type.
Well, yeah, and what I love about that opening scene is that, like, he's in the Humvee, and it's like the pre-flashback scene, right? He's in the Humvee, and like AC/DC's playing on the radio, and the guy sitting next to him is like looking at him and then looks away, looks at him and looks away, and then he's like, "Can I take a picture with you?"
Yeah, it's just he's this absolute celebrity. He's they call him the prodigal son later on, and I mean clearly the whole world knows who this guy is, but he's just not the kind of guy that you really want to be associated with. He's almost like a Paris Hilton type person. He's famous, but he's not the good kind of famous.
Right. And what I love about that scene where the kid asks to take a selfie, he throws up the peace sign, and Tony's like, no, gang signs. And then the kid's like, oh, okay. And then he's like, no, I'm just kidding. Throw it up.
He goes, peace.
He says,
I love peace. Be out of a job without peace.
Yeah. So it's, and then that is directly contrasted later on in the film when he's had an interview with Vanity Fair, and they're like, and he says, the moment that the world doesn't need my weapons, I'll be happy to be building, bridges and stuff. Actually, it was prior to that. Right. I'll be building hospitals for the children. I'll be building children's hospitals is what he says.
Yeah.
And that actually happens later in the film, but in a flashback from that moment. So like a day before, He says that to the guy in the Humvee.
And you can just see the difference between the rehearsed public-facing Tony and the guy that he really is when he's just around a few people.
Right. And he's got this kind of double life, and that's kind of the trope that superheroes always have to play with, is this double life thing. And they build you up throughout this movie, and I think this is done really well, to having Tony being this man that's about this double life, to Tony, this superhero with one identity.
And so you expect him, given the opportunity, to just hide, like he's always been hiding. And then he just sits down and goes, nah, screw that. This isn't X-Men. We're not going to hide. This is, I am Iron Man.
Right.
And it really sets a tone for the whole rest of the Marvel series, because nobody really has these secret identities.
Right. And, like, everybody knows who Captain America is. Everybody knows who all those people are.
Right. And up to this point, it had all been superheroes that hid. It was, Spider-Man, who was very much different from Peter Parker, and Bruce Wayne is very much different from Batman. Whereas this is the first time that Tony Stark is Iron Man. To the public, they know it.
Right. And then they of course have to address that trope of like, well, if you don't have a secret identity, then they're going to come after the people you love. And
they're going to do that anyway. If I've learned anything
from any
superhero movie, is they're going to do that anyway.
Right. Even if they have no idea that Aunt May is your aunt, they're going to...
So Uncle Ben still gets shot. Let me tell you. Every single time.
Right. I will say this, though, just kind of like the movie starts, and then on that first scene of him, I noticed that, this is 10 years ago, roughly now. He looks so young.
So young.
And he's like a baby.
I'm sitting here thinking, he doesn't really look that much different than he used to when I see him now. And then I'm thinking, wow, yes, he does.
Yeah.
Like, he's a little baby Tony. A little baby Robert Downey Jr.
And what's crazy is I remember when this movie came out thinking to myself, that's a grown man. Yeah,
I mean, he was in his 40s at that point, I guess. I think.
Right, and I mean, yeah,
late 30s, early 40s. Yeah, he was in.
But I remember thinking that he was older, and then now when I look at him in that compared to in like Civil War, I'm like, whoa,
Tony, you're looking rough, brother.
You're getting older.
Yeah.
I also noticed. I don't know that I loved what they did with his makeup in those first scenes. He had like, I don't know if you noticed this, but he had like very, very red lips.
Yeah, I did.
I don't know if that was supposed to be like a nod to like Tony likes red later on down the road, but I don't think that it was necessary.
It may not have even been intentional. Like they were very washed out first scenes, military desert, but it wasn't like a military desert movie. So they weren't really, I don't think, set up to film like a military desert movie.
I don't know. That Jericho missile scene could not have been cheap.
No, but at the same time, it's, you're coming at it from a different, like Jon Favreau, the director, is not the kind of guy that makes movies like, The Hurt Locker.
Right. No, I mean, I agree with that.
So I'm just saying I think that's a lot of like, it's superhero Tony. He's supposed to stand out as opposed to, that kind of thing. Because he really does. I mean, he stands out compared to everybody else with the beard and the
suit,
the whole thing, and standing there with the sunglasses, and he's in the Jesus pose as the shockwave comes and gets him. Like, that's an amazing scene.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. It's absolutely awesome. And just on the topic of amazing scenes, and I'm jumping around a lot here, but they also give us the very first like Iron Man suit being put together onto Tony's body scene.
Yeah,
and those are the best scenes.
Yeah, absolutely.
They've got to stick one of those in every movie just to remind you that, hey, this is freaking awesome.
It just keeps getting more simple for him to put the suit on, but there's still always that, like, that mechanism breaks and he has to do the old-fashioned way. And
right.
Every single movie. So what I think is very interesting, one of the themes I noticed from the beginning is, well, not from the beginning, from the after the time where it's post-flashback and he gets captured. This guy has absolutely no idea how arms trading works.
Right.
Where does he think that terrorists get their guns?
Exactly. And he is like completely oblivious to, and this goes back to how Obadiah like must be incredibly controlling of Tony as the only father figure he's ever had. Because like how on earth does Tony not know who he's selling his weapons to?
Yeah, no, I mean, but even then, like, he just seems flabbergasted about the fact that they would even have access to it. Even if he didn't directly sell them to the terrorists, he's just never considered the black market, any kind of, shady deals like that. It's just, there's no facet in his brain as to how somebody he doesn't want to directly have his weapons has them. He's never considered it.
Right.
And that just fascinates me. This guy is the weapons mogul of the whole world. He's the guy. There's literally a bomb with his name on it that comes and attacks him. There's a great scene where he's laying there on the ground and this bomb that says Stark Industries blows up in his face. And that's the first time this guy has ever thought about that.
So he even has that like rehearsed thing that he says to the press every time they ask him, how do you feel about being an arms dealer in such a violent world? And he even says to Christine Everhart, it's an imperfect world, but it's the only one we got. I guarantee you the day my weapons are no longer needed to keep the peace, I'll start making bricks and beams for baby hospitals. And then she says, do you rehearse that much? And he says, every night in front of the mirror before bedtime. And that, I know I've already touched on that, but I think that is such a pivotal quote in this movie. And that he is like, I've been told to believe this every night since I called it bedtime, right? So like I am a child on some level. Not only that is like, I have to believe that weapons are needed to keep the peace because that's what I was born and raised on. And then when my father died, the man that took over raised me on that.
Right. He literally says, okay, and here's a straight answer. My old man had a philosophy. Peace means having a bigger stick than the other guy.
Right.
So he is convinced that his sticks only go to the right guys. There's no physical way in his brain that they could possibly have his weapons. Anybody that's not supposed to.
Yeah, and he's got this approach in his mind that like he's building weapons for the U.S. or UN government or whoever it is that keeps peace in this world at the time before major superhero storylines. And they're the only ones that are getting his tech.
Yeah.
And, he talks about, my father helped defeat the Nazis. He worked on the Manhattan Project. A lot of people, including Professor Brown, would call him a hero. But there's two sides to every war, of course, and that's something he's never considered. Nobody has ever put it in his face to consider. It's never come across before, and I think that's why so early on in the movie they have to have somebody like this character of Jensen who ends up sacrificing himself for Tony. Tony has to be addressed. Like, to him, he sees we're fighting this war because people are attacking us. And Jensen shows him that we're fighting these wars because people are attacking us and you are intervening.
Yeah.
And they're getting upset about it and attacking you.
Yeah. And it's just, and that's the thing, is there's only ever been one side of the coin for him. And he's faced with that first choice when they tell him, they first kidnap him and they say they want him to build the Jericho missile for them. And he immediately just goes, I refuse. I thought that was incredible. Like this, there's no way that right before that bomb that literally had his name on it blew up in his face would this guy have said, I refuse. Because he was faced, it was a turn early enough on that he was faced with the choice between living and dying, and he chose probably dying.
And he was like, he also, I think he believes he's a little bit invincible, and he does like a ton of growing up as soon as he sees that they have that, and then somebody saves his life, it's kind of that come to Jesus moment, so to speak.
Yeah, this guy who doesn't know him from Adam helps him build this arc reactor helps keep him alive to start with by putting an electromagnet into his chest.
Which I don't understand.
We'll come back to that in a minute because I have a lot of thoughts on that. But
I don't really get it.
This guy puts the electromagnet into his chest, man. Keeps this guy alive. He wakes up, there's a car battery attached to him, and this dude helps him break apart different bombs to get like 1.5 grams of palladium and, build this arc reactor in his chest. This guy has no idea who he is. It takes them like 6 scenes of them being together, working together, and talking before Tony ever asks his name.
That's true. And it's also a testament to how hard of a worker Tony is. We have that scene where we're looking at Tony growing up and we're seeing all of his education, and he's so smart, but he's so sheltered. He's got this genius brain.
Yeah, graduated at 17 from MIT or whatever.
Right.
And then just did whatever for like 4 or 5 years, comes back at 21 to give up on his dreams and run his dad's arms company.
Because he's the greatest arms engineer of all time.
Yeah, because he can do anything. He build anything he puts his mind to.
And it shows that, he has no practical application for what he's building. Like, even they talk about later in the movie when he built the arc reactor, and they were like, there was no practical application for this.
Yeah, we always knew the arc reactor is... Obadiah literally says, we always knew the arc reactor was a publicity stunt. It was never going to be cost efficient. But they made it, and it worked, and it saved his life somehow.
Right,
Still
and there's
not really sure on that one, but...
And there's this world where there's sustainable energy and still any sort of crisis in the Middle East, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, no, but that's the thing is that it's not sustainable energy because apparently it's more expensive than regular... It's clean energy. It's not sustainable.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, either way, there's a sustainable energy source that we're not giving any credit to.
Right. Because there's one, and it powers the Stark bomb factory.
Which I think is a whole nother... Just what?
Yeah, it powers the Stark bomb factory. That's it. That's all it does. The cleanest energy known to man powers the bomb factory. So that's interesting, but, that's what...
I mean, there's a lot of stuff about Tony that's, like, immediately contradictory. Like his clean energy powers a bomb factory. And he, there's this recurring theme throughout the film where they say... There's this recurring theme throughout the film where they talk about Tony not being sentimental or nostalgic, but then you'll see Tony doing things all the time that are very clearly sentimental or nostalgic.
Yeah, I mean, he directly
like, for example,
says, he has that line about there's a lot of things people call me. Nostalgic isn't one of them. When Pepper hands him the first arc reactor framed, which saves his life, but a whole different...
Right, that saved his life. And I don't think he's willing to admit that he's nostalgic or sentimental because, like, earlier in the film, when he's talking to Pepper, he is wrenching a hot rod, which is like a nostalgic car, and he's wrenching it with like tools. Like hand tools.
When he has robots that can do it, they're the smartest robots ever. They know whether or not to douse him with, fire extinguisher.
But not only that, like he's immediately sentimental and nostalgic, and he's immediately nostalgic when he gets back from being captured, and that he goes back into building more Iron Man suits. Yeah. Like, you could have just called it quits when you escaped, but instead you were like, this was awesome. And you wanted to build more of them to avenge. And, I don't know if, avenging somebody and nostalgia could definitely be in the same category, but you are revisiting something that happened in the past.
But no, I mean, he doesn't have a purpose at first for building them. Well, he just comes back and just decides he wants to build another one. That's before he even knows something's going on in Gulmira or whatever it is.
Right, and then he finds out about Gulmira and he weaponizes it.
Yeah, at first it was just a flight suit. He was just, can I do this? Because I think he's just so bored with his own intellect that it's finally a challenge for the first time, in a long time.
What do you think of Tony's cell phone?
Oh, the fact that he just... Wait, what is Tony's cell phone?
Tony's cell phone is that phone that it was like the first phone to have like widescreen video. It was the one that you hold it and you flip it sideways.
Yeah, I forgot he had that.
I wanted to take a moment to mention that.
It's so 2008. It's so pre-iPhone.
Like, it was like and so what do you think of did you notice that the only magazine we really see Tony talk to is Vanity Fair?
Yeah, I thought that was pretty self-explanatory in there. He is, by his own admission, the world's most vain person. Who else would he talk to? He doesn't have time for Time, obviously. He was Time Person of the Year, I think. Pretty sure there was a scene of him being Time Person of the Year,
I think that was the case. I know his father was, and that's a big deal later on.
Yeah, but he didn't have time for all that. That's old news. He's interested in Vanity Fair, for starters, because of Christina Everhart. Christine Everhart. He's interested because of her, and he's also interested because it's a gossip rag. That's the only interesting kind of news to him because he makes the real news. The news is him.
Right, and he wants to be like he is that vain, and I think it's super interesting that like in the beginning when he talks to Vanity Fair because the girl's cute, and because actually I love. At this time, I love that he talks to Vanity Fair because he has Jon Favreau's character look at her and be like, she's cute, and then he's like, she's all right. Like, he looks at her and we talked about this scene a lot, and I could talk about it all day.
It's a very important scene.
It really is, and it's probably my favorite scene in the whole film. But he talks to her because she's cute, and then he goes through the whole thing where he argues with her, and then she says, "If you ever lost an hour of sleep in your life," and he said, "I'd be prepared to lose a few with you."
And she just looks horrified. And then there's a cut of them back in his bedroom.
And there's the whole thing where
that's the whole thing is they paint him as being irresistible, even to the military colonel, even to Colonel Rhodes, because there's that scene where they're on the plane And Rhodey's like, I'm not drinking. I said this 6 times. I'm not drinking. And then there's a straight cut, and they're just plastered.
They're plastered drinking sake.
Yeah.
I think it was sake.
While his flight attendants, like, strip for him.
And the pole comes out of the crowd.
Yeah, it's just, he's irresistible. He's impossible to get around. And I think that's what ends up drawing him to Pepper so much, is because she does not care that he is Tony Stark.
Right. She is just like, okay, whatever, Tony.
But no, back to Vanity Fair. I think he also talks to Vanity Fair because she's clearly the only one interested in asking him hard questions.
But he even deflects those hard questions like they're nothing. Like we're gonna end up quoting this whole.
No,
scene.
not at the end though, because at the end, that's what gets him. Is he's ready. He's prepared with his alibi. He's got his cards, and she just hits him with something. He goes, "Oh crap! I can't do this."
Right. She talks to him at the end, and he's talking about he's like losing his words. There's been speculation I was involved in the events that occurred on the freeway and the rooftop. And then she's like, do you expect us to believe it was a bodyguard? And he like fumbles over his response.
And he goes, I'm not a superhero. She just goes, I didn't say you were, buddy. Sorry to burst your little bubble there.
And then he's even more caught off guard. He's like, well, that would be outlandish and fantastic is what he says.
That would be fantastic. He says, that would be fantastic, which is just, and she kind of looks at him and goes, what? Are you Iron Man? And she knows at that point because she's the only one that doesn't stand up at the end.
She's like, oh my gosh, Tony, you sly dog.
She sits right there. All the other reporters freak out, and she just sits there. As it pans out,
yeah.
She just chills because she's the only one that ever got the answers from him. And I think that's very interesting.
I'm glad she never came back. I don't think she comes back.
Most people don't. Rhodey didn't even come back. They got a new actor. Which I have a note in here, written in here, that says, I'm so glad they got Don Cheadle.
I like Don Cheadle, but I think if we get into those other films, we're going to get to a point where I'm like, I don't understand why I'm supposed to know so much about this guy, and I don't know anything about him.
I mean, they made it clear enough that it was still Rhodes. Like, it's still Rhodey.
I thought Jon Favreau was an interesting choice for Jon Favreau to make in this film.
Yeah.
And I think he was an interesting choice throughout all the films, and I think at first he was like just going to be like Jon Favreau, I'm just going to be this, occasional cameo bodyguard, kind of stands in the back of the scenes, that way we don't have to pay somebody else for it. And then I think he liked himself so much that he continued to add himself in and add more lines.
He does always appear in his own movies.
Well, I think that's pretty normal.
But I mean, it's not though. It's not really normal.
Well, it's not like unheard of.
No, it's not unheard of, but it's not very common.
Is he in the Jungle Book?
I don't know.
There's only one person in the Jungle Book. It's Mowgli.
Well, then he's probably not in the Jungle Book. He probably made some animal sounds.
Or voiced an animal.
Yeah. I mean, he is usually in his own movies. But I think it's interesting because when he starts to play a major role, or a more major role, is Iron Man 3, and he didn't direct that one.
Was he responsible for the new Spider-Man?
No.
No?
No.
He has a huge role in that movie.
Yeah, he's like, when he starts to get more lines and stuff is when he takes the reins off. I thought it was really interesting. But, I mean, that's a topic for a later day.
So what do you think that Tony's only friend is like the defense contractor for the Air Force?
That doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, he's clearly never developed meaningful relationships with anybody outside of his work. Like, he is his work.
And I think it's interesting that Rhodey, like, doesn't worship Tony. Like, he doesn't take the crap either. He's kind of like Pepper in that he's like, okay, Tony, whatever, you do your little Tony thing.
And that's why I think he's drawn to Rhodey, is because Rhodey, again, doesn't care that he's Tony Stark.
Right. He's not impressed by it. He doesn't even want to know about, like, the Iron Man suit when he's building it. And I think, he doesn't care about that or anything. And then, when Tony's like, I don't want to make weapons anymore, he's even like, he's kind of confused, but he's not like, I'm going to make you make weapons.
All he does is make that joke about, man, you make a lot of people real happy because we are all terrified now that we don't have weapons anymore. We are literally terrified. We're getting murdered on the daily.
So I think that's an interesting friendship.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting that that's his only, I mean, his friends are pretty much Rhodey, Pepper, and the bodyguard, which just says a lot about him.
Well, and his other friend that he thinks is a friend, and the only person that he really puts a lot of trust into and that he wants to impress is Obadiah.
Because Obadiah to him is his father, and all Tony cares about is his father.
And Tony, has this like lifelong legacy of living up to his father and wanting to be just like his father, and that's going to create a bunch of conflict with people down the line who knew his father. But
right. And Tony doesn't care about Tony. Tony doesn't want to be Tony. He wants to be Howard Stark too. And that's what Tony's saying. He's not nostalgic for his own life. Like, I'm willing to bet the Corvette that he's wrenching was probably his father's car.
That was not a Corvette.
Whatever it is. The hot rod. I don't know who made those hot rods. It's been a long time, man.
I don't either.
They're from like the 40s. It's probably like a Packard or a Studebaker or a Rolls Royce. I have no idea.
He has a Rolls. There's a Bentley in the movie.
No, it's a Rolls.
It's a Rolls. Rolls and an Audi.
Yeah, Rolls and a lot of Audis. Even the random people on the highway are driving Audis.
Oh, I know.
Which might
There's
just
like
be
an
Los
Audi.
Angeles, but,
It was in Malibu. Is that Los Angeles?
Yeah. I mean, Malibu's like a little island outside of LA. It's for super rich people.
Like Silicon Valley?
No, that's different. Silicon Valley is where they invented the internet.
Is that really what happened there?
Yeah.
Is that what that is?
They invented like computers and the internet and stuff. And like Stanford's there, and that's originally where Microsoft was and stuff. I think. Don't quote me on that. There's a lot of tech companies out there.
Back to Iron Man. I think it's interesting that while he's doing all the tests to like learn how to fly, that he can't do the math to figure out how much thrust his little body needs to fly.
Yeah, I think he can do the math. I think that is definitely some movie magic.
I think it absolutely is. Like
Because
Tony Stark.
That is a great montage.
Who built an arc reactor in a cave with a box of scraps.
Great line. Tony Stark built this in a cave with a box of scraps. I just want to, real quick, I want to give a shout out to Jeff Bridges. Because I think Jeff Bridges, who plays Obadiah Stane, did a really great job with it, and he was not really given much to work with.
I agree with that. I also don't think I realized it was Jeff Bridges. Like, I know Jeff Bridges looks like and sounds like and is like, but I think he really became that character. And maybe
I agree with that, but like, it's not a very good character. Like, it's not particularly well written, and he's just overtly sinister. And that's
like
part
he's
of
got
that was a whole flaw in the movie for me, is that Obadiah is obviously the bad guy here from the beginning. Obviously,
well, I think right at the beginning he doesn't seem like the bad guy when he's doing the like award presentation and all that kind of stuff. But it's very clear that like Obadiah brings Tony back into arms dealing.
Yeah, I mean,
the greatest mind of our time.
Yeah.
Making weapons.
Yeah, I mean, like, he's obviously the bad guy there. What I don't get is his motive, because he wants Tony.
It's the business.
Why does he want Tony dead?
Because then he has controlling share in the stock.
I just feel like that wouldn't happen.
It already happened. It happened while Tony was alive. What happens is Tony comes back and he's no longer the genius that invents for the business, and he now wants to be like the CEO for the business and take over the like moral and ethical compass of the business.
And the board of directors says, no, you're not going to do that because we want money.
Right.
But,
which, I mean, any good board of directors for
that's
a company
why
of arms
companies
dealers.
have boards of directors, is to keep the crazy CEOs in check, to keep the inventors from going crazy. But I don't get why he wants him dead. I don't see the motive there. I feel like Tony is worth more to Obadiah alive.
Well, Obadiah believes that he has Obadiah lives in this sort of same problem that Tony has, and that they want to live up to Howard's legacy. And Obadiah's got this kind of control over Tony where, that's kind of his whole shtick, is that whatever Tony do, I can do better. And if I can't, I can control Tony to do it for me.
Yeah.
But
then he can't even build the arc reactor. Like, he can't get his team of scientists to build the arc reactor.
But then he's already got the perfect arc reactor that he stole from Tony, because he can control Tony with temporary paralysis.
If Tony was dead, he doesn't have that innovation. I don't think he thought that one through.
Oh, the problem was, the reason he wanted Tony's arc reactor was so that he could recreate it. He thought that if he got everything he does because he's recreating what Tony's already done. Yeah. His Iron Man suit is just a much improved but still crude version of the Iron Man suit from the cave. Right. So he thinks, if I can get Tony's arc reactor, like miniature arc reactor, then I can recreate it.
But that's the thing. That's the whole thing I'm saying, is like, I think that they didn't really flesh out his motive enough. I think that he is a villain for the sake of being a villain. And that always rubs me the wrong way. It's like, he would obviously have thought, like, unless he was just so far off the rails, but he would have thought, I probably need to keep the innovator around.
I mean, I would definitely agree with that. I think that, it would not have been to his benefit to kill Tony.
Yeah, it's not going to help. He makes the comment about the golden goose. It's like, you don't kill the golden goose, though. That's the whole adage, is you want the goose, not the egg. You don't just murder the goose.
Well, but I think that the whole thing is that because he's the bad guy, he can't quite see that, and he wants his golden egg, and that's
what I'm saying. That's
the greed part of it.
That's it, though. Is he's just the bad guy, and I don't like that. And I think that they did a really good job with motive for the villains throughout the rest of the Marvel movies. I think this one, they fell a little bit short on villainous motive. Like, I think Obadiah Stane is a villain for the sake of them needing a villain.
I mean, yeah, they definitely had to have a villain, and I think that this was a good choice because they needed somebody who was going to be, you know, like relatively easy to flesh out while Tony was doing his thing. Like, I think they knew that they were going to have this, you know, this long-term character with Tony Stark. At least they were hoping that they were. And they needed to just kind of have
a villain.
There be somebody for him to defeat. Right.
Kill off and not worry about it.
Right.
But that's part of the problem, though, is I don't think he learns anything specifically from Obadiah being the villain. Like, I don't think he learns anything that he hasn't already known, that he didn't figure out earlier in the movie.
I think that it makes him appreciate those that he trusts. Like, it definitely increases his relationship with Pepper and with Rhodey, which down the line I think is important because, you know, he ends up marrying Pepper and she always comes in to save the day. And it also, I think, puts up some walls and it makes him kind of look back at who he was and who his father was. And, you know, I mean, that's kind of the theme of the whole thing. But overall, I mean, let's kind of back this up a little bit and just talk about, you know, do you think that we had a good villain in this movie?
I think we had a good enough villain because I think to some extent, but that's what I'm saying is I think that and the 10 Rings, everybody in the Middle East is a direct result of Obadiah Stane, but I think that he learned just as much from getting kidnapped as he did from this fight with this bad guy. Like, I firmly think that he would have come to the conclusions he came to from that fight eventually. And I think they could have done the villain better.
Here's the thing, is I think it comes full circle because I think that, like, Tony, the split personality is a result of the way that he was raised because of who Obadiah raised him to be.
Right. But and maybe I'm just stuck on the motive thing, but to me it doesn't make sense that this guy wants Tony dead. And if he didn't want Tony dead, there would be no Iron Man Tony. So it feels like a little bit too much of a plot device. I think they could have done a better villain. I don't know how, and I don't want it changed because it created the character it needed to create, but I just think that it could have come off better. Interesting thoughts. Yeah, it's like, I think the villain worked. It felt like a very functional villain character to me. It just seemed like it was they kind of wrote the story and slipped him in the back end. Like, how do we get from this point to this point, mold the character around the conflict? Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with what you're saying. I think that they kind of had to just make it happen and make Obadiah do his thing and be the bad guy that he ended up being. And that's okay. Like, it doesn't have to be, you know, this grandiose villain that makes you think about everything. It's just they had to get Tony to where he is. Well, and you also got some of the best villains in the history of movies have, like, no clear motives or are created by the hero being the hero. You know, I mean, there's always the conversation about the Joker. You know, like, why is the Joker who the Joker is? Because Batman is who Batman is. Right, and that's the thing is the Joker isn't the villain. Batman is the villain to Batman. Right. Like, that's the whole thing with the Joker is an implant. Neither of us could talk tonight. That's the whole thing. Not about the Joker. That's the whole thing with the Joker is an imprint of Batman. He is the bad side of Batman. And right. I think that Tony does a good enough job at being his own enemy because Tony is and you know, granted, it would have been a really short and crappy movie if Tony sees a bomb blow up in his face, escapes kidnapping, and it's just like, I'm a new person now, and everybody's totally on board with it. But that's pretty much all they needed to happen is, like, Tony comes back and he's not a weapons maker anymore. He doesn't have he's not the same person. Right. He's somebody completely different. Yeah. And to me, the rest of the movie kind of seemed redundant. Well, it had to end. Right. He has to have a big fight. Yeah, and it's a superhero movie. It's got to have a big fight. And it's got to have the love interest, and he has to go into cardiac arrest and have him saved by Pepper, like, well, she's not even there, and everything has to happen that way. And I don't know. I don't know. Just something about it kind of rubs me the wrong way. I don't know. If you were to rate Obadiah as a villain, like 1 to 10. 1 to 10? Okay, so if you want me to rate it on a 1 to 10, give me a 1 being what, a 10 being what? So 1 would be like Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face who continues to flip coins. Oh, God. And 10 being like Heath Ledger's Joker. Okay. I would probably say, you know, probably right at a 5, honestly. Right dead in the middle. Because on one hand, you know, well portrayed, well done. Consistent. Great acting job. But, like, on the other hand, questionable motive, you know, doesn't really think out enough as to what's going to happen, like doesn't plan very well. I think a part of a great 7 is like a lot of planning, and part of like a bad like 3 is absolutely no plan, having no idea what the consequences of his actions are. And I think that it really comes, for me, it comes back to like, this dude should not want Tony Stark dead.
I think he's got a great plan. I think he's a 7.
You think he's a 7?
I think he's very well thought out, because he goes in.
So,
I think not necessarily his
like,
Tony.
what is his plan?
Okay. Well, his plan is kill Tony, take over the company, become a billionaire, and develop the army so that he can take over the world or take over the military or whatever it is his plan is with that. And that is the unclear part. That's what keeps him from an 8, 9, or 10. And of course, I know in this scenario, our 10 is like the planless greatest villain. But, I mean, I think he's very well thought out in that he goes and he tricks the 10 rings into kidnapping Tony Stark for too small of a sum. And then it doesn't even matter because he goes and he kills them all.
Yeah. Which he was always going to do. And I think that's important because they talk about, Yinsen says to Tony, like, if you do this, he's not going to kill you. Tony goes, yes, he is. And Jensen's like, yeah, definitely. And then I think that they totally flip that around. It's like, yeah, you're still going to kill him.
It's like, even if Tony doesn't escape, you're going to die, because that's the part that kind of doesn't make any sense to me, is like, what was Obadiah's plan if Tony didn't escape? Like, would he just have a bunch of Jericho missiles?
No, I think the plan was that they would I don't know what they wanted it to do. I think, hold on.
I guess then he would just have control.
Let me think this over. I think that we're missing something here. The 10 rings were supposed to just kill him. Like, not build. I think that the Jericho missile thing was their idea, not Obadiah's idea. I think that once they found out that it was Tony Stark, once they ripped the back off his head and made that video about, like, you told us, you didn't tell us it was Tony Stark. I think they were literally supposed to assassinate him at that moment and not ask anything of him.
So Obadiah's plan was like, I'm going to get him captured and killed.
Done. Clean,
and it'll be clean.
Clean break. Let it go.
And done. And then they made it complicated, and we're like, no, we're not going to kill Tony Stark, but we will hold him prisoner.
And we'll make him build stuff for us, because they think if they have the Jericho missile that they're invincible, because it's the only thing they've seen that can really like scare them.
Right. I think it's interesting, partially, that the Jericho missile is like such a big deal to them when this is a world where the Manhattan Project happened.
Yeah, but he negates that and says the line about, like, they always said that the greatest weapon is the one you never have to use. And then he makes the comment that, like, no, the greatest weapon is the weapon you only have to use once.
Right. So you're saying that the atom bomb is too much weapon.
Because the atom bomb, at this point, we used it once, and it's a threat. And now it's a threat. And so he's saying, this is my next weapon you only have to use once. It's like, once they see we have this, once we use this one time, we don't have to use it again. You see what I'm saying?
Tony never finishes off the villain.
He doesn't kill people.
Yeah, he does. He kills tons of people.
I mean...
What are you talking about? I just watched him use missiles to direct target.
Yeah.
Like 10 terrorists.
But he doesn't kill, like, anyone, like, important. Like, ever.
Right. Like, he doesn't kill the leader of the 10 rings. He leaves them to the village. We may have to do like an Iron Man. So, all in all, what are your thoughts on Obadiah?
Like I said, I give him a 5. You gave him a 7. I guess we'll call him like a 6 on the Tommy Lee Jones to Heath Ledger scale, which is now our official scale of villain ranking.
I like that.
So, we'll give him a 6. It was good enough. It served the purpose in the movie. It got done what it needed to get done. And at the end of the day, we all went home happy. Jeff Bridges delivered a great performance, and I think he's probably pretty pleased with his role as Obadiah Stane. Maybe. I don't really know. Jeff Bridges, if you're listening, shoot me an email.
Baconandeggsmedia@gmail.com.
Yeah, please, like, just say, hey, what's up? We'd
love we'd
love to have a conversation with you about how you felt about this villainy. But
Jeff Bridges, at me on Twitter. At Americ Harlan. So, talking about the villain, let's get into something real quick. And by no means do I want to sit down and complain about this movie, but, like, did you notice any flaws? What were some things that you thought could have been done better? I think it was necessary, but I don't like, and I've got the movie actually playing right next to me right now, silently, and I've never really particularly much cared for this scene. It's when he leaves Gulmira and then he gets into the, like, training exercise, quote unquote, conflict with the Thunderbirds or whatever. I've never particularly liked this scene, and I get, like, they had to reveal him to the military somehow, but I think they could have done it.
Why would the U.S. military, and I definitely wrote this down, I have a note saying this, why would the U.S. military want to kill this guy? He's killing terrorists for them, doing their job for them, and they're sitting there going, yeah, shoot it.
Well, I think the issue is now there's a bogey
Yeah.
they can't control, right? So that's why they've got to do it. And I'm gonna play devil's advocate,
But, like,
even if I
they're
disagree
continuing
with
to
what I'm
shoot him
saying.
after he saves the pilot's life.
Oh yeah, even after he saves the pilot's life, and then no, they don't shoot
They
him after
try
that
to.
because
Jarvis literally is like, they've re-engaged. Do you want to pull up? And Tony's like, no, I'm gonna save this dude. And then the military leader is still like, yeah, kill him. And Brody's like, maybe
Yeah.
not. Maybe let's not murder this guy. Let's not do that.
And like they even call it out that they know it was a cop out to do this whole thing to how he reveals himself to the military, and they're like, oh, just say it was a training exercise. That's
And Brody's
typical
like, that's
BS.
not gonna happen.
And then
Brody, it cuts to a scene where
and then
Brody's like, it's a training exercise.
right.
There's a lot of great cuts like that in
And-
this movie. That was something I noticed, that like those very contradictory, we're not going to do that. And then bam, we did that.
Right. And then later on, they're like, Tony and Obadiah are fighting in the streets of LA. And like the military's like, oh my gosh, we need to scramble jets. Like, okay, you weren't about to go into a no-fly zone where there were literally terrorists. You're not going to
And
fly
shoot
jets
them
into
on
LA.
a freeway.
Like, right.
So-
Like,
Sorry.
like there were known terrorists where you weren't willing to fly just 20 minutes
And
ago
now
in
you're
this
gonna-
movie. And then Brody's got to be like, just a
And now you're
training
going to
exercise,
fly jets
everybody.
into downtown Los Angeles, just murking people left and right. Innocent American citizens. Yeah.
Near the very factory where
I mean that's
These
such
weapons
a
are
typical,
made.
military trope though. If anything happens, let's scramble some jets. Let's just get them ready. Just scramble.
scramble the jets. Scramble them, scramble
Got to
them,
make
scramble
a jet
and cheese
omelet.
the
You gotta
jets.
break a few jets.
Are you talking about
Bacon
bacon
and
and
jets.
jets?
Anyway, there's one thing that I didn't really get in this movie and subsequent movies is I don't understand the power thing. So let me
What do you
explain.
mean? Tell me more.
They put the magnet attached to the car battery, so it's an electromagnet, so it doesn't lose power or whatever, to keep the shrapnel like out of his heart. How does that work?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't it just like pull the shrapnel out of his chest and just like attach to it? Apparently not. Because hang on, and this is definitely something that's bothered me every time I watch this movie. When Pepper pulls the thing out to change it, he's fine. She sticks her hand in there and everything, and he's just like, whatever, until she pulls the actual magnet out, he's fine. Then later on, when Obadiah pulls the thing out, he immediately goes into like cardiac arrest. Immediately. There's no 5 minutes where we can just mosey around and talk about, oh, it's pus. No, it's not pus, it's just plasma. Ew, it's gross. There's just immediate dying.
Well, most of that happens also because he was paralyzed for 15 minutes. Right. So, you can chit chat for like 35 seconds with Pepper while there's nothing in your chest. But when you're paralyzed for 15 minutes.
No, but like,
It's
but
bad.
he
Right,
pulls
that-
it out.
that to
like,
me
he pulls it out, and
breaks the
immediately he like starts dying that time.
It's because he's paralyzed. Like when Pepper pulls it out, he's just as frustrated. What bothers me about the whole Obadiah pulling the thing out of his chest is that Obadiah has a little grab things out of people's chests tool
Exact
that's
size,
the
yeah.
exact diameter. Like what? It's like something you manufactured and you make carrying cases
you can
for.
manufacture this, but you can't make an arc reactor.
Right. What? Also, I don't remember if they do this in the later films, but what do you think of Tony cutting circles out of his shirts?
Does he do? He doesn't do that.
He does. Like there's circles cut out of his shirt so
When?
that you can see it.
I don't think
throughout
so.
the movie.
It's usually just
can
under
watch it
his
again,
t-shirt until
but-
Obadiah cuts the shirt.
No, there are like multiple scenes where it is like
I
there's
never
a circle
noticed
cut
that.
out of his shirt.
I now I'm remembering noticing that when I was a kid. I thought that was later on, but I mean that's just Tony Stark for you. Like he's still vain. Like at the end of the day, he did not change that much. Like, he's still very materialistic, very like
know-
image focused. Nobody who's not image focused would have that beard.
Oh, I know that beard is very, very well done. It looks
Nobody,
like
yeah,
it's straight out of the
it's
Hunger Games.
nobody would have that beard unless they were trying to cut an image.
If you weren't entirely image focused, and I'm glad that they were able to create Tony Stark in an era where social media was a thing, but it was before like
Yeah.
Instagram and
Oh, because that would have been
like,
the whole movie.
all that. Because
like
I think
Tony Stark's on Twitter.
Right. Tony Stark on Twitter would have been like a huge thing. And I'm super glad that like we didn't have to deal with that, because I think that like from this point on, those kind of tropes are going to be required when you have to play this kind of character, and it's going to be fine, and it's just going to be part of it. But I'm glad that this character didn't have to have that in order to be successful.
Absolutely. Yeah, it just makes it so much more poignant that he can just exist, and like, yeah, they kind of get to him a little bit in the media, but like the media is not a huge deal with him, and that's fine. I like that.
I like, just in general, if we're talking about a scene that I think was done extremely well, is the scene where Pepper is in his office and Obadiah walks in, and you have, like, to this day, it makes my skin crawl when he's, like, having that conversation
waiting for
with
her
her
to
and
slip
he's
up.
like,
she just doesn't.
Right. Like, the way that they have that chemistry on screen and are able to, like, because those are two characters that up to this point I don't think have interacted on screen.
You know what I thought they did very well, speaking of characters and being well performed, is just the transition of Agent Coulson from this like mindless bureaucrat into this badass, shield guy. And he just, every time he comes on screen, he's a little bit more confident. Every time he's like, I'm getting my meeting. Listen, it's happening. Where at first he's like, yeah, we'll schedule something, we'll set it up. And it just, every single time he gets a little bit more confident until he's just like, it's shield.
And what I love about Agent Coulson in this movie is that you can almost forget about him, right? Until that last scene. Like, it's kind of tough to say, especially now, being somebody who watches Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and like has seen every film up to this point. It's like, you know how important of a character he is, but in this movie he's so forgettable up until he says it's S.H.I.E.L.D., especially if you know what S.H.I.E.L.D. is going into it.
He gets the bomb out, and she's like, oh, is that a thing that's going to unlock doors? Is that a thing that's going to unlock doors? That's what you're doing right now. You're like, you're going to unlock this door, right? And he goes, back up. And they all turn around and just blows it up. Look at it, and just blows up. Oh, man. S.H.I.E.L.D. Strategic Homeland...
intervention.
Yeah, something like that. I've never known what it stands for, because it is such a mouthful.
Oh gosh, I'm gonna find out, because we can't have this conversation without saying it.
I mean, we can. We are capable. We have the technology.
Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement, and Logistics Division.
Yeah, it just rolls off the tongue. It's great.
Yeah, we're working on it.
We're working on it. Every time he's just like, yeah, people tell me this every time I speak.
What's crazy about the whole S.H.I.E.L.D. thing is, like, I know that it was underplayed and it was all about the reveal and it was movie magic to make it so that they didn't have a name for S.H.I.E.L.D. until the end of it. But, like, later on it is very clearly revealed that, like, oh, Howard Stark was part of, like, inventing S.H.I.E.L.D. and S.H.I.E.L.D. has been around forever. So, I mean, that's just a little splinter.
I mean, it happens. It's like, at some point it's about making a good movie.
Right, I know.
It's why that robot keeps putting him out even though he's not on fire. Like, it's just a little bit of making a good movie.
Right. It's just a little bit of, like...
It's why he can't do the math to make sure the suit flies, because he has to land on the cars and stuff.
Right, he has to wreck his cars and do all that.
Oh my god! And when he goes, powering down, and just falls through like 3 levels of the house.
Yeah. Ooh, what are your thoughts on this? This is something I have never particularly liked in the whole Iron Man franchise, is the camera angle of inside Tony's
it's terrible.
mask.
It's terrible.
He's like, it's too far away.
Stupid. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to get that far away from his face.
Right.
At all. Like, the helmet is literally his face. It's in his face.
Right, and like it's got all those like heads-up display and stuff. You should
be able to see Tony's eyes, and that's it.
And I've never liked that, but I know there's no other way to do it, and I know they tried like 100 different
things they did. I'm certain.
They were like
certain that they didn't just land on that to start with.
This thing's right in front of his face. What are we gonna do?
Yeah, there's just.
But it's
I'm just imagining Robert Downey Jr. like in a dark room with a light and a camera in his face.
Right, and he's just kind of like rotating around
and talking to Paul Bettany, who's probably just in a different part of the room, just yelling.
Right. I love his relationship with Jarvis.
Oh yeah.
Like this is very early, and he's like, Jarvis, are you up? And he's like, it's your computer, dude. Yeah.
I mean, Jarvis is his best friend. Like, not Rhodey. Like, it's definitely Jarvis.
Well, it's because Jarvis is the greatest creation.
Because Jarvis is an AI. We still don't have that. Like, Jarvis is an AI that can think.
Right, which is super
and
cool.
terrifying.
Yeah.
It could definitely pass the Turing test.
I don't know about that.
Jarvis? I'm pretty sure it could pass the Turing test.
Maybe after it gets hit with an Infinity Stone.
No, before that, I think.
Right now on the screen is Obadiah with his perfectly shaped miniature arc reactor grabber.
I never even thought about that until you said something. It's like, it is literally the exact size, and it has the necessary, like, prongs and necessary equipment to just, like, turn it and grab it. I don't know, man.
What did you notice in this film that was a nod to films to come? Whether it be Easter eggs or, characters in the background or mannerisms or, the obvious one that they definitely shove right in your face but don't really say anything about is Phil Coulson.
Yeah.
Right.
And you never think he's going to be this huge part of everything, but then he ends up being a huge part of everything, and so does Shield.
Right.
It just seems like it's just a thing. Like, oh, there's another government agency. No, not really.
Yeah, no, that's going to be like the center of attention for like the next 5 films.
And then very quickly not the center of attention.
One, but right, and then it'll be kind of disbanded because they need a new.
They need a new big bad.
Right. Although Shield isn't even the big bad.
Kind of is. Shield is maybe not the big bad, but Shield is a problem.
Yeah, I mean, Shield creates problems, and like Shield is Hydra, and all that kind of stuff, and like and you have these 2 major story arcs that I still think are the 2 major story arcs. Is like even after Civil War is like it's really all about Cap and Iron Man.
Yep, we'll get to that eventually.
Thor and everybody else get their standalone movies, but they're all just supporting characters. It's about capitalism versus patriotism.
We'll get there eventually.
Right. I also noticed, and I mean, like right now we're obviously going to be talking about a lot of stuff that technically we haven't gotten into yet, but I also noticed that in this movie, Tony is already drinking that like green concoction.
Yeah.
I did not catch that.
Yeah,
until,
no, he definitely has already started on that.
Like there's none of the tattoos, like the blood tattoos or anything on his body, which is what I'm going to call those. But he's definitely already drinking the green liquid, which like Tony doesn't strike me, like he's not in particularly good shape. Which sidebar, Tony Stark is like the only superhero in the modern superhero era that gets to be a superhero and just not be ultra
it just doesn't
fit.
Work out at all. He does nothing.
Right. And like even like this is getting way far into it, but like Doctor Strange is like a sorcerer supreme and he's in excellent shape, and Ant-Man is just a guy in a suit.
Doctor Strange
literally.
Doctor Strange also like manually makes his fingers work with magic, so that's a whole different level of
right. But then like Ant-Man is just a guy in a suit, literally just like Tony, with technology from the same people, and well, kind of the same sort of groups of people, whatever.
Ant-Man's suit relies a lot more on Scott's Scott
Lang.
Relies a lot more on Scott's like athleticism and his abilities than Tony's does. Anybody can be Iron Man, and I think it's part of the whole thing.
But Tony is Iron Man.
Right, but like he can be anybody. He is the most important person at that point, but he could be literally anybody.
# War Machine rocks.
With an X. I'm gonna say it again. I'm so glad they got Don Cheadle.
Yeah, Don Cheadle.
I like Don Cheadle so much more as Rhodey. Anyway, we'll get into that when the time comes.
What's interesting is that he drives an Audi and all of S.H.I.E.L.D. drives Fords. Did you know that?
I did not know that. I thought everybody drove an Audi in Iron Man.
Nope. They drive Tauruses, like old body style Tauruses.
Interesting.
I think. That's what I'm looking at. B Crown Vics.
I mean, that's a pretty coppish car.
Yeah.
So I mean, that makes sense. S.H.I.E.L.D's definitely not, the snazziest organization.
Would you have put in Iron Man by Black Sabbath when they did?
No, I actually wouldn't have. I think it's a little bit heavy-handed. I wouldn't have put it in at all.
You can't not put it in.
I think you can.
You got to remember, 2008 was still in the era of Guitar Hero.
I mean, this is true. I think they could have placed it a lot more like delicately into the point where it kind of makes you giggle or whatever. And you're like, oh, there's that song. Like when somebody has the Spider-Man ringtone in Spider-Man, it's just like, hey, there's a thing.
So do you think they could have done something with the minor third and done like sort of like a score, like a film score with either like an electronic orchestra or even just a regular orchestra to more incorporate that kind of Iron Man leitmotif into the film?
I'm actually surprised it didn't exist more in the score.
Yeah, I thought for sure that would have been like, and maybe that's like, maybe they had the same conversation and they were like, no, that's beating it over the head.
I mean, I don't think so, because I know the work of the composer and who did the score, which is Ramin Djawadi, and he does that a lot, where he will put like he'll use the leitmotif to his advantage a lot. And I just think this movie lacked any kind of like auditory cues like that, but this was also like a long time ago for this kind of thing. It's like that's more of like it's become a lot more present recently than it has in the past
I think it's
decades.
become more present. I think it's become more present in this genre recently. I mean, leitmotifs are
no, but
definitely
as far as like
opera,
as far as like action movies,
right. That's
like,
what I'm saying.
Definitely
like
stuff that sticks out now. And the music is becoming a more integral part of movies recently, like action movies.
Right. And I think
we all saw movies like Kingsman, and like the leitmotifs in that beat you over the head, but not in a bad way.
Right. They've got these characters with these sounds that are incorporated with them, And I think when you watch, like you have to watch Wonder Woman, and we'll have to get to that another time. But you'll see how they do it in that. And that is one of the few films where they have that motif that was introduced when she was a minor character that now is amped up, and it like literally gives you chills.
It was really well done in the Man of Steel movies, which I think is like probably one of the only things that was really well done in the Man of Steel movies. Is that like they have that Superman theme that just kind of goes on in the background. Right,
and you get to have that familiarity with Superman over time.
Yeah,
and it's the same thing with like all the Spider-Man movies. Like you know, whenever somebody does have that old '60s Spider-Man,
yeah, and it happens like in like there's one in the Tobey Maguire movies where like a guy playing it on a guitar, and you know, it kind of happens like that. And I think that's more of like a Marvel thing to do. But then they just put it in at the end, like as a credit scene, and I'm just like, okay, I mean, whatever. Like it doesn't hurt the movie. I don't think it helps it.
Yeah, I definitely remember even the first time watching it, because that was at a time when that song was going through sort of a renaissance.
Oh yeah, because of Guitar Hero.
Because of Guitar Hero, and all credit to Guitar Hero for that one. You know, I didn't think that when rewatching it as an adult, like it didn't really cross my mind, but then it was like such an obvious nod that it very much was like part of why I wanted to see it so bad was so that I could hear Iron Man. And maybe that's why it was good that it was played at the credits, is like, you know, they saved the very best for the very last part, you know. Sure.
It's like this I think is it would have been weird if they used it at the beginning where they used Back in Black.
Oh, you definitely couldn't use it at the beginning, but maybe when he first puts on like the Mark II.
Yeah, I could see that, like as part of the montage. Yeah, I could see that. I don't know. I don't really necessarily.
Or like when it first takes off.
If you're going to use an actual audio clip of the song, I don't really know there's a great place to do it. But
I mean, the song also is generally like a little bit weirdly recorded.
I'm generally opposed to that. Like I personally dislike when action movies use actual recorded songs as part of their score.
I remember thinking the first time I saw it that Back in Black was a weird choice, because I was like, you know, 16-year-old me or 15-year-old me was like, do they know there's a song called Iron Man that's like a metal song?
And I think Back in Black was fine there just because it was the opening, and they didn't really do it again. Like there wasn't another instance of like a song happening. But it's either and that's the thing is I hate when these like big blockbuster action movies are like, we're gonna throw a song in there. And it's like either go full into it and you get like they did in Baby Driver, where it's just the score is like songs and it revolves around that, and then or you go the complete other direction and just cut that out entirely and you focus on the score. But there's so much of this, especially in the big flagship like Marvel movies, of just like sticking songs in places where they don't really belong, in my opinion. And it's just something that always sticks out to me.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I do like the songs. I think they're fun
sometimes.
But I think they were obviously going to run into an issue here where they knew that these characters were going to interact, and obviously at this point there's just the one character. Yeah. But like, you know, when you do get those interactions, that's why I think it's so good to have those leitmotifs and that traditional score. Like even if you have different composers and everybody coming together, you've still got that same melody that each character is associated with. And I think the problem they would run into is because there's so many different composers and everything, is like they wouldn't be able to like make the chords fit when everybody was on screen together.
For sure.
You know what I'm saying? Like it would, like there's just so many characters that it would be this kind of kerfuffle of sound. So I don't exactly know how I'd feel about that.
Well, I mean, I think that's why you're not a composer, is I think that any composer worth his salt is going to be able to figure that one out. Or they're going to say screw it and create like an Avengers leitmotif.
Right. And I think that would be a smart move as well. I do want to go back to a content thing real quick. Tony in his final fight, I don't know how we haven't talked about this because this is one of my biggest thorns in my side, is, you know, he's fighting Obadiah, but the only reason he has any sort of loss in this fight is because of like the most cheap way for Iron Man to lose anything in any sort of situation, and that like he doesn't have enough power.
Well, because he's using the like burnt out unit.
Right, he's using the old unit, but like that's like the same problem that with like the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies didn't work, is because in every movie it's like, oh, he's got handmade web slingers and they just break them, and now he can't do the Spider-Man thing.
Goes against a little bit of Tony Stark for me, is like he would definitely have a backup.
Right. Like Tony Stark is supposed to be the Batman.
He would
of Marvel.
have. He would have
to be ready for everything,
ready to go. He would pull off like they're inside the hot rod trunk or something like that, and he just opens one of those cases.
Right, there's like the V8 on the hot rod.
The cylinders are actually just arc reactors.
8 arc reactors,
something like that.
Right, and
he's like, I'm gonna run off with the broken arc reactor, and it's just they keep talking about it. It's to the point where he's like, Jarvis, shut up, just put it on my screen.
Right, and I don't like it.
It's cheap. It's cheap.
I think it's It's cheap. It's like Iron Man is defeated by
And then he still
power
wins.
reserves. Right, and he wins because Pepper wins.
Yeah, because Pepper always has to kill his villains for him.
And then, like, he's, like, talking about, I need to get out of this suit, and he takes the glove off, and then he goes to shoot him later on, and, like, glove's not on. And it's like...
Yeah, why would you take that off?
You know, like, he reaches his hand up. Right, like, what do you mean you
Let
need
me
to
tell
get
you a
out of the
thing or
suit?
two about a little phrase I like to call a plot device. Is
Right.
that sometimes you have a point A in a movie and you have a point B, and you need just a little bit of like movie magic to get you there.
Like, there's no reason why Tony would ever lose this fight to
No, in
Obadiah.
the clearly superior suit
Ever.
that goes slower and then somehow catches up.
Yeah, that one didn't make any sense either,
Yeah.
like the flight thing. And then Obadiah loses his tracking and, like, it's just the world's worst shot.
To be fair, Tony wasn't a great shot at first with that thing either, because he just completely misses with that missile trying to shoot the Ten Ring guy. Like, he just shoots it, like, way over his head.
So I guess that was a little... We'll revisit that when it's relevant,
Yeah, it's like...
kind of thing.
He's basing it off that suit. Clearly, that suit can't aim. You know who can aim is that tank that shoots him out of the sky.
Yeah, the tank deserves...
I was watching
Deserves
that
a
and I
medal.
wrote a note about it because I'm like, that tank is an amazing shot. You hit this guy going, like, real quick. It just...
It shoots him in the
knocks him
face.
down. Done. And he gets up and just shoots the tank, like, over his shoulder with the world's tiniest bomb that blows the
Yeah.
tank up. Some
He's
Indiana,
an arms dealer. He's an arms
Indiana Jones
inventor.
stuff right there.
Did you know that scene with Indiana Jones was, like,
Where he shoots
not
the guy
scripted
with
that
the
way?
sword. Yeah, and it would have been
Yeah.
so much worse if they did it any other way. It's one of the greatest scenes in action movies ever, where he just gets tired of the dude flinging the sword around and shoots him in the face. But that's literally it, because that has created so many opportunities for people to do things like that.
But yeah, no, I don't like that Tony's weakness of not having enough power comes out, because I think that, like, with Superman you have to do that, right? Like, kryptonite
Right,
beats
because
Superman.
Superman's unbeatable.
And, like, otherwise nothing beats Superman. So you've got to have the
Rock
kryptonite
beats
thing.
Superman.
But I think Tony Stark, I think Iron Man is a beatable,
Yeah, he's just a dude
Villain.
in a metal box.
or not villain, beatable hero. Right. Like, just beat him. You know, just make Obadiah's
Stronger,
suit
yeah.
a little bit better.
But he didn't have the ability to make it better. He had the ability to work with what he's working with, which is what Tony Stark built in a cave with a box of scraps.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps.
I will if there's one quote I will remember from this movie for the rest of my life, it is that quote. Because that has stuck with me.
I am Iron
It's
Man.
stuck with me my entire life since I've seen this movie. Is I just remember Jeff Bridges yelling, "He built this in a cave with a box of scraps."
I think that's going to be the first line of the description of our podcast. Tony Stark was able to record this in a
With a
cave.
box of scraps.
Box of scrap. All right, so one last thing we obviously have to talk about with any Marvel movie is the post-credits scene.
So talk to me about it. What happened?
So basically, Tony is walking into his house and he sees a person standing by the window in his home in Malibu saying, "I am Iron Man." And then he talks about how he's not the only superhero, and we are introduced to Nick Fury,
Director
of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Samuel L. Jackson.
Samuel L. Jackson. It's like this huge reveal, like, oh my gosh, Samuel L. Jackson's in this movie. He's not in anything except he's in literally everything.
Yeah, but he was Nick Fury. Like, they
whatever.
designed Nick Fury to be him. So when it came time to make the movie,
Yeah,
they were
like
like, hey, let's get the guy that the comic book was literally based on.
That iteration of the character, anyway.
Yeah,
Nick Fury's been
what was it? What's that game you always played? Marvel's Ultimate Avengers? Yeah.
Marvel's.
Yeah, well,
Ultimate
he
Avengers,
was white
yeah.
in that.
Well, you could play
you?
Black Nick Fury too. There's, two of his
I don't
skins
know.
are black.
That game was trash. I mean,
Game was
you could say
awesome.
that, but you're wrong. I
Well, it's going to be part of our
spent many a
Twitch
year
series.
watching you play that game, and it was not fun. Anyhow, director Nick
game.
Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D., comes in and he invites Iron Man to be part of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Right. He's like, you're not the first superhero, and we're kind of like,
Yeah,
okay.
and then, we get introduced
What
to
do you
Captain
mean?
America, like 5 movies later?
Right. We don't get a
Iron
proper...
Man gets another movie before that sentence comes true.
Right.
There's a little thing
Right.
I want to introduce you to called Iron Man 2.
But basically, we get introduced to the idea that he's not the only superhero. We know that the whole Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. thing is going to happen, and there's going to be more S.H.I.E.L.D. story and superhero collabs, and that's exciting. And my thoughts on this post-credit scene were it is extremely well done for what it was. at the time.
Yeah.
It gets you very, very excited about the idea of future
Still probably the
superhero
second
movies.
best one I've seen.
I don't want to know what your favorite is, although I know in my mind what it is. I don't
mean,
want you to say it.
I think you know what it is. We'll talk about this later. But I think you absolutely know which one it is.
Yeah, but I think it was extremely well done. It was a good post-credit scene. It didn't have any like obscure character that... I mean, I guess Nick Fury is an obscure character if you don't know who
Everybody except
S.H.I.E.L.D.
Iron Man
is.
at this point was an obscure character.
Right, and even Iron Man, like when they were like, Iron Man's coming out, I was like, Iron who? Like that was, I mean, I guess because I had played Ultimate Avengers, I knew who Iron Man was, but I didn't think much of Iron Man as a character, and I honestly thought it was kind of a B-list character to be making a flagship movie about.
Robert Downey Jr. needed to come back.
Right, and Robert Downey Jr. was like a C-list actor to be doing it. Although, 15-and-a-half-year-old me did not
I did know that, actually. I had seen multiple movies with him in it.
Even a little bit.
My mom was always like, oh, it's a shame he turned to drugs in his later years. I was like, well, now you've ruined it for me, Mom. And then Iron Man came out, and she was just like, oh, I'm so glad he's doing better from all the drugs. I'm like, Ma, stop
all the
ruining
drugs.
things for me. I'm 12. Was I 15?
15.
I just turned 15. Oh, yeah. I was
when
15
Iron
for 2
Man
months.
came out.
You're right. Yep. Thank you for pinpointing my age to our listeners.
But anyway, yep. You were 15 for like a month and a half.
Okay, let's get real serious with it. You want me to give an exact day count?
No.
My address is...
But,
and that's where you just put in a beep.
But, Baconandeggsmedia at
here's
gmail.com.
my physical address. Come stalk me, please. Thank you.
No, but I thought the post-credit scene was very, very well done. I think it got everybody excited about future Marvel movies. It was also kind of Marvel standing up and saying, like, hey, these movies are going to not suck. I know we did pretty decent with those Spider-Man things, but then they got a little weird. But we're not doing that again, and Sony's
Topher
not involved.
Grace is not going to be in these things. Do not worry. Have peace of mind in knowing that we're not bringing back Topher Grace, James Franco. I mean,
Topher
Dunst,
Grace.
Tobey Maguire, anybody except Willem Dafoe. They could bring Willem Dafoe back, and I would be happy. Or Alfred Molina as Doc Ock. I have serious thoughts about the Spider-Mans that we could come to in another day, but...
Well, there are many great superhero trilogies that are just dead.
Right.
So we can address those in
There are many
times.
great superhero trilogies, and the original Spider-Man movies are not one of them.
Oh, I disagree, but whatever.
I don't remember asking.
Anyway, what are your final thoughts?
Iron Man.
How do you rate it? What is... Right. This is your 1 out of 10. No,
I need a scale, man.
There's no perfect.
No, but I mean, I'm talking about it just as a movie. We need a scale.
Actually, I've been thinking about this a lot. So to wrap up, some final thoughts. What were your final thoughts on Iron Man as a movie?
So if I had to give Iron Man a rating, I would say Iron Man is a bacon temptation omelet. You know why? Because a bacon temptation omelet is great. You got the bacon, you got the eggs, you got the cheese, you got the cheese sauce. You're like, this is great. It's a well-composed omelet. This omelet has everything I want on it. And then for some reason, it's just got like fresh tomatoes on top of it. Which is like, I like tomatoes, but what are they doing there? Why are they on top of this omelet? Like, this is all very conflicting taste with these tomatoes I'm getting right now. So like, I'm gonna leave the motiveless villain as my tomatoes. Bacon temptation omelet.
Interesting.
Done.
Interesting. I'm gonna go with a fried steak and eggs. Now those eggs are definitely going to be sunny side up.
Okay.
And I say this because it's a complete meal. Okay, it's a whole thing. You get your fried steak, sausage gravy, hash browns, shredded, of course, sunny side up eggs. You get your protein, your meat, your potatoes, your eggs. Also, plenty of Easter eggs, sunny side up. But then you also get 2 pancakes.
So you're saying maybe it's just a little bit too much?
Wait a minute. We had a complete plate of awesomeness right here. What is this? It's great. It's delicious. I love it. It's more than I could have ever asked for. More than I could have expected. More than I could have asked for. And I
have a different feeling about the pancakes. And this is actually where I was going with this after this. I told you when we were preparing for this that I learned something about myself when I was watching Marvel. Or watching this movie, in that I preferred the Marvel movies, and I prefer a lot of things at the beginning. Like, this is the beginning of the Marvel movies. I prefer the first couple seasons of TV shows. I'll tell you why. Is it feels manageable. It's like I can grasp the full story. I know what's going on with every character. And you get 5-6 seasons of a TV show down the road, and there's like, they're in different countries, especially like a big like fantasy TV show. Like, I do watch Game of Thrones.
And Charlie's
I do watch Game
dead.
of Thrones, and like, I don't know what is going on in Game of Thrones at this point. Like, there are so many different storylines. They're all branched out. It's the same way with Walking Dead. It was the same way with Lost. It was the same way with Breaking Bad. All the great shows you ever want to watch, they all have this problem.
It's the same way with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
It's just like, it's too much. And that's what I'm talking about, is Marvel always has to give you those extra pancakes. They're like, no, you need more pancakes. But by the time you get around to, like, Infinity War, whenever it comes out, there's going to be so many pancakes. You're going to be surrounded by plates and plates and plates of pancakes, and I don't like feeling like I'm drowning in pancakes. So it's
all you can eat
it's not that I
pancakes is a
dislike
good
the
thing.
newer movies. It's just that I feel more comfortable with them when they're manageable. So all in all, I think Iron Man's a great movie. I think it does what it needed to do in that it kicked off the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe. It gave us a lot of great movies to come after it. And I like that you can just enjoy it on its own. It doesn't have to be part of a series. So I think in all due aspects like that, it's a great movie. I would give it an overall like a serious rating. I'd probably rate it like a 7 or an 8 on as far as superhero movies go, just because it is manageable, it is well done, it's well thought out, and it's just a solid movie.
I mean, I completely agree. I definitely think it's one of my favorite superhero movies of all time. And I don't say that lightly. And you'll find out over time that Iron Man is not particularly my favorite character, but I really, really like this movie, and I really like how Robert Downey Jr. portrayed the character. And I think the villain is swallowable, is manageable. I think the relationships are well done. I think that the presence of the actors on screen is well done. I honestly give it probably like a 8 to 8.5 out of 10 in the genre of superhero films. Now maybe in terms of all film,
don't even want to go there.
It'd be closer to like maybe closer to like a 7 or but in this genre I think it deserves
it's got its
lots
merits.
of credit, especially in an era where like dark films are taking over and like nitty gritty, how evil and brooding can we make this.
And it was a superhero movie that came at a time when superhero movies were on the downturn. It's like we had just had Spider-Man 3, and that was really the last offering.
So I think overall it was very, very good, and I think within the genre it is one of the best, and it deserves all the credit it gets for what it is. And it's a good movie.
Fair enough. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. All right, guys, thank you for listening to the first episode of Bacon and Eggs. We're going to be back here shortly with more of the same content you've already grown to know and love, I hope. If you need to reach out to us, we're at baconandeggsmedia@gmail.com, as well as I am at WowNow on Twitter, but the O's are zeros, so I know it's confusing to say out loud. It's W0WN0W.
Absolutely, and thank you again for listening. Again, my name is Tyler Carlin. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. You can find me on Twitter at AmeriCarlin, or you can reach out to us directly at baconandeggsmedia@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening. Please come again. Enjoy your breakfast foods on the way out.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps.